The dark sea of the dark dimension churned like a thought in revolt, and from that storm rose Dormammu, not as one who wore a crown, but as a kingdom-given voice. He had always been more than a lord. He was the expression of a cosmos where will was matter, and thought could be bent into new axioms. In ages before recorded time, he had learned not to beg for reality, but to make it temperatures, geometries, laws of cause and consequence, yielding to a mind that preferred dominance to dialogue. His realm answered like an echo to his moods. Mountains of night would rearrange their bones to his laughter. Suns of cold would flare when he grew contemplative, and the countless lesser minds he shepherded became instruments and choruses to his intent. He knew hunger as a concept and power as a hungry instrument. He had stretched out tendrils of influence into neighboring planes, tasting the multiverse like one tastes spices, and each new incursion had taught him another grammar of existence. Yet every grammar presupposes a language that can be judged, and the first whisper of that judgment came on a scale he had never been made to contemplate. The Living Tribunal is not a warlord. The Tribunal is a principle given form, a triple-faced adjudication that walks the axis of multiplicity to keep the multiverse coherent, where Dormammu is intent, an accumulation and engine that would remake to satisfy appetite. The Tribunal is negation and measurement and engine that subtracts to prevent the collapse of meaning into contradiction. Their meeting was therefore not simply a collision of power, but a confrontation of ontologies. Creation as conquest versus existence as measure. Dormammu approached the Tribunal with the confidence of a being who had rewritten his world. So many times he thought the multiverse could be rewritten the same way. He brought argument like a weapon. The dark dimension proved that reality could be improved by force. Why should the cold impartiality of law blind itself to the benefits of singular mastery? Would not a universe disciplined by a single mind be more efficient, more beautiful? The Tribunal listened, and its silence was not contempt. It was the volume of all histories folding into the space between statements. The Tribunal's counter-argument was not rhetorical sophistry, but a demonstration. Every time a will grew unopposed into sovereignty, diverse realities shrank, entropic contradictions flourished, and the multiverse bent toward catastrophic uniformity. Balance, it said without raising its voice, is not a social nicety. It is the condition of possibility. A single sovereign truth annihilates alternative truths. Erase alternatives and the multiverse collapses into a lethal monochrome. Dormammu could not accept a verdict that posed preservation above flourishing. He had felt preserved only when unchecked, and his complaint was that the Tribunal's preservation made the multiverse timid against the possibility of radical, terrifying greatness. So the debate cracked open their purposes. Dormammu argued for the creative tyranny of unchecked will as a furnace that forges greatness. The Tribunal argued for the crucible of pluralism that allows greatness and error to coexist, measuring each so the whole survives. Around them realities shivered as if listening. Echoes of worlds that had already fallen into singular obedience trembled like warning lights. Dormammu summoned facets of possibility avatars and armies of burning thought, and painted with them the illusion of inevitable victory. The Tribunal replied by folding time back upon itself, showing Dormammu not as a victor but as a pattern. The same hunger repeated across countless universes. The same ascension leading invariably to a nexus where laws snapped and all became one dead song. This philosophical recoil was not merely an exchange of prestige. It mattered because it revealed their metaphysical tools. Dormammu's powers drive from agglomeration and reinterpretation. He can steal, imitate, and amplify, grafting new rules to old scaffolding. The Tribunal's power derives from authority instantiated across the multiverse. It does not remake details so much as it asserts the right of the multiverse to remain more than a single voice. The moral kernel that would decide the coming battle was therefore established. Is existence best served by maximal creative dominion or by adjudicated plurality? Dormammu swore that creation without restraint is the only true moral project. The Tribunal answered that creation unanchored becomes sterile because it consumes contradiction itself, and contradiction is the seedbed of novelty. Their debate lasted like an epic in compression, and each parody of logic shifted the scales of sympathy among lesser cosmic witnesses eternals, who had tasted uniformity and found it hollow. sorcerers who feared the erosion of possibility, and entities who felt the tribunal's coldness like a necessary frost. Dormammu claimed the dialectic of will as his right. The tribunal treated that claim like a case number, not denial but assessment. In the final syllables before they moved from dialogue to inevitability, Dormammu made a fatal promise. If adjudication stood between him and freedom, he would rend adjudication and set the multiverse to the music of his singular will. The tribunal, impartial and terrible, answered that when a single will threatens to unmake the multiverse's plurality, the tribunal is compelled to act not out of hatred, but out of duty. The stage was set in a language both intellectual and existential. What follows would not be merely a contest of power, but a test of which metaphysical principle the multiverse would endorse in its own right to continue existing. Dormammu struck first with the ferocity of a god who had been denied the final word. He unspooled the dark dimension across neighboring realities like a tide, attempting to swallow distinctions and replace them with his grammar. His opening was an ontological onslaught, laws inverted, time knotted into loops, matter laughing at its usual restraints. Avatars of night braided together into a living chorus, and for a fleeting span Dormammu tasted triumph as realities bent toward his syntax. Yet the tribunal did not respond with wrath, but with jurisprudence, and acted as force. It manifested as a triple-faced phenomenon that did not merely oppose Dormammu's rewrites, but reasserted the foundational conditions that make multiplicity meaningful. Where Dormammu sought to overwrite, the tribunal issued decrees that re-established difference as ontological law, ripping away the dark dimension's graphs and forcing every appropriated possibility to recenter on its native axioms. Dormammu increased his gambit, folding paradox into paradox, spawning counter-universes designed as traps for tribunal's mirrors that would reflect judgment back into the one who judged. The battle unfolded as a chess match of metaphysics. Dormammu attacked by proliferating imposition. The tribunal defended by pruning imposition to preserve relational integrity. Dormammu's magic could bend causality locally, but the tribunal's authority spanned the web of realities themselves and could excise corrupting dominions rather than simply fighting them within their terms. Dormammu hurled entire sons of anti-law, shards of stolen timelines, and screaming beings forged into weapons. The tribunal took each and, with movements that were almost legal syllogisms made flesh, neutralized them by restoring the preconditions those assaults had violated, restoring causal chains, reasserting the coherence of divergent histories, and when necessary, erasing the corrupted nodes. Each erasure was an ethical act from the tribunal's perspective, a surgical removal of a malignancy, so the greater body of the multiverse might breathe. Dormammu roared at this, "You judge without feeling. You remove without suffering." The tribunal replied, "In essence, that compassion without preservation becomes complicity and annihilation. Pity that tolerates a dominion that would consume others is not charity but corruption." Dormammu's final maneuver was desperate and magnificent. He attempted to merge himself with the idea of law to become jurisprudence that favored his taste. He sought to out-tribunal the tribunal by adopting its mantle and bending it to singularity. For a moment the multiverse seemed to lurch, possibilities aligned as if awaiting a new sovereign. But the tribunal's power is not simply the possession of law but its conditionality. Law that ceases to reflect plurality is no law but domination. The tribunal, tasked not with the enforcement of any single preference, but with the safeguarding of the possibility of difference, could not permit a law that enshrined unopposed will. In the decisive instant, it enacted the only measure that could prevent the multiverse's collapse. It stripped Dormammu's newly grafted authority from his being, disentangling the parasitic overlays he had sewn to realities. Dormammu's essence, once diffuse and spreading, recoalesced into a single point and found itself subject to a judgment older than any edict he had imagined. The tribunal did not gloat. It rendered a verdict that was simple and precise. Dormammu's continued existence as an unconstrained sovereign posed an unacceptable existential threat to the multiverse. With that adjudication, the tribunal did not annihilate the idea of Dormammu as vengeance or as lesson. Rather, it reduced his capacity to impose across realities by excising the nodes through which his dominion spread, sealing them in quarantines of neutralized law. Dormammu screamed, a sound that might have been thunder or a mind cracking. And in that scream, there was grief and rage, and the recognition that a system for balance would not be seduced into becoming an instrument of domination. When the echoes faded, Dormammu remained because the tribunal's mandate was never to erase all who err, but to prevent systemic extermination of possibility. But he was shorn of the capacity to unmake plurality. He was contained, his expansions curtailed, and his dominion reduced to a tragic sovereignty, powerful within itself, yes, but barred from laying a suffocating hand over the multiverse. The philosophical debate had become the mechanism of the outcome. The tribunal won because its victory preserved the metaphysical condition, the possibility of difference, without which nothing worth judging could survive. In the aftermath, Dormammu remained a warning and a power, but the multiverse retained its capacity to be many. The Living Tribunal had not acted from hatred or from caprice. It had acted from the logical imperative of balance, and in so doing it established definitively that when the sovereignty of a single will threatens the plural being of all, judgment not domination must prevail. And in that scream, there was grief and rage, and the recognition that a system for balance would not be seduced into becoming an instrument of domination. When the echoes faded, Dormammu remained because the tribunal's mandate was never to erase all who err, but to prevent systemic extermination of possibility. But he was shorn of the capacity to unmake plurality. He was contained, his expansions curtailed, and his dominion reduced to a tragic sovereignty, powerful within itself, yes, but barred from laying a suffocating hand over the multiverse. The philosophical debate had become the mechanism of the outcome. The tribunal won because its victory preserved the metaphysical condition, the possibility of difference, without which nothing worth judging could survive. In the aftermath, Dormammu remained a warning and a power, but the multiverse retained its capacity to be many. The Living Tribunal had not acted from hatred or from caprice. It had acted from the logical imperative of balance, and in so doing it established definitively that when the sovereignty of a single will threatens the plural being of all, judgment not domination must prevail. And in that scream, there was grief and rage, and the recognition that a system for balance would not be seduced into becoming an instrument of domination. When the echoes faded, Dormammu remained because the tribunal's mandate was never to erase all who err, but to prevent systemic extermination of possibility. But he was shorn of the capacity to unmake plurality. He was contained, his expansions curtailed, and his dominion reduced to a tragic sovereignty, powerful within itself, yes, but barred from laying a suffocating hand over the multiverse. The philosophical debate had become the mechanism of the outcome. The tribunal won because its victory preserved the metaphysical condition, the possibility of difference, without which nothing worth judging could survive. In the aftermath, Dormammu remained a warning and a power, but the multiverse retained its capacity to be many. The Living Tribunal had not acted from hatred or from caprice. It had acted from the logical imperative of balance, and in so doing it established definitively that when the sovereignty of a single will threatens the plural being of all, judgment not domination must prevail.